It's Lloyd, and I'm back with Thunderous and with JC. We're here to talk about the Fabian Society and the UK. We're picking up where we left off on part one, and we're going to have a look at some of the early influences and successes that the Fabian Society have had, for instance, with presidents of other nations, prime ministers of other nations. And then we're going to, as the series progresses, look at some of the very strange influences they've had, from the occult to Islam, of course. And perhaps we're going to look at some of the personal lives of the individuals involved in the movement. And of course, you're going to find no shortage of, shall we say, sexual deviance. So guys, welcome back. And thank you to the audience for joining us. And please do engage in the chat. Looking forward to hearing everything you have to say. And yeah, so guys, how are things in the UK? How are things in the Bitcoin salt mines in Guadalajara, Chihuahua, Mexico?
I guess things are just not going in the direction that we would like things to go. But in this series, you are showing that maybe all of these things are not happening by coincidence, but by design, which is perhaps more worrying.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's by design. Yeah.
It's absolutely by design. And hello to everybody. And as we were just coming on air, Lloyd, just for the audience, just listening to some information by one reputable channel that was commenting on a 14-year-old Iranian boy who had AR'd and essayed a person from our own country who got away with no prison time at all and just sent on a course for understanding what consent is. So a 40-year-old girl's life has been ruined by an Iranian immigrant child, and all he gets to do is go on a course, and he's really going to learn from that course.
Yeah. No, and you know, how much more can the general populace, can the British citizens take? And by citizen, I mean the ethnic Brits, or shall we say the loyal British citizens take. This is getting too far. And there may be some good news. It may be that, for instance, Keir Starmer will be deposed within the next couple of weeks. Apparently, there are stories that he might be asked to step down right after the elections happening, I believe, on the 7th. But then, of course, out of the frying pan into the fire, then you're going to have David Lammy or Angela Rayner taking over. And yeah, who knows? And Shabana Mahmood might move up a post to, to be the number 2 in the country. So yeah, you've got foreigners calling the shots over the Brits, and I don't know where their loyalty lies. And clearly, it's also not to those on the conservative right.
I think to what you're saying there, Lloyd, I think to anybody that's discerning to the things that we have discussed over the years, that it makes no difference who the front man is. The agenda is the agenda, the end game is the end game, and any politician that replaces him, if indeed he does get replaced, is just another person that's just a front man. That's all.
Fair enough. Yeah, they are emissaries of the ones that they represent, which would be not the people. You know, it is sad. No, the Brits are not the minority in the UK. They are Brits, French, Germans are the minority in certain cities, like in the major cities. Like Brits are the minority in London, for instance, and many other cities. So they're not the minorities in the country. Of course, that can continue. However, I think we're going to see some kind of response before that happens. By the way, YouTube is very unhappy with the series that I've been putting out. For instance, the one on Crowley, this one. YouTube really doesn't like these. Obviously, they touch on topics. For instance, I got an email from YouTube that my previous Fabian series is election interference. So yeah, talking about the Fabian Society's election interference.
That's just ludicrous, isn't it, Lloyd?
Yeah. So let's dive in. So we ended up on the permeation strategy last time. We ended here, and we showed how effectively they've been able to implement the ideas that they've been formulating. So very quickly, they've been able to get ideas passed as law in the UK. And I just before we go further, someone tried to assassinate God Emperor Trump last night, and this is very concerning. This is multiple times in just over a year or just under a year. This is shocking, and this is leftist violence. And of course, we now know that if there were no SPLC, there would be no right-wing violence, because the SPLC was funding, aiding and abetting, begging for, assisting with, helping to find, resurrect, whatever. We now have learned that the SPLC have been indicted for funding right-wing causes like the KKK and others, so that they could foment racial violence, so that the funding, well, so apparently they funded something like 300,000, for instance, to the Charlottesville massacre or whatever, or riot where one person got killed, the Charlottesville riot, but they made $65 million in donations. So yeah, they're making their money back big time. Any thoughts on that before we go on?
No comment.
Okay, so we know that a leftist trans-allied extremist assassinated Charlie Kirk. His girlfriend was a, shall we call it, a tranny, right? Leftist socialist lynched conservative Quentin Drank in France. I mean, a mob beat him up, and they were part of the leftist socialist political party in France. Two lefties blew themselves up while preparing a bomb in Rome, right? The left are behind an attack that caused a massive power outage in Germany. These are socialists as well. Apparently, there were 13,490 cases of politically motivated crimes from the left just in Germany last year. A leftist assassinated the Pfizer CEO, and that was celebrated. There have been 3 attempts on Trump's life by leftists. We need to understand that the socialist left is a threat to the world. It's a threat to the Republic. It's a threat to the West. It's a threat to Christianity. It's a threat to Western civilization. And everyone's going on about, oh, the far right. I mean, 95% of the terrorists on MI5 watch list are Muslims. I mean, this is insane. This is absolutely crazy. Any thoughts, guys, before I go on?
I think you nailed it in your final comments that it's a threat on Christianity. I would say all of these things are primarily an attack on the biblical narrative and Christianity.
Yeah. JC, anything before I move?
Just thinking that all of this is very similar to how Islam operates, is telling people, well, you see, people are being unfair to us. We're the victims here. That's why we can be violent. It's like people are just being told a lot of propaganda, makes them be violent. And then that gets reframed, well, it's because it's normal, because we have the right to do so. And it's absolute insanity.
Yeah, no, these people, you know what, we should stop calling it insanity. It's evil. Leftism is evil adjusted for political purposes. Socialism is evil. It is not just insane.
Absolutely. I think when you look at atheism, which is what all these are a byproduct of, I've often said that, and you know, I've said this too many times, Lloyd, that I think, and as well, JC recently in private discussions, I think atheism is by far the most evil, toxic, corrosive, divisive, destructive death cult that has ever been conceived. I don't think there's ever been conceived a mindset more evil than atheism.
Agreed. So yeah, so let's continue. Am I still in touch with Sam Shamoon? No, I mean, yeah, let's just say things went south due to various reasons. And although I did receive notifications from several people that he's been saying positive things on his channel while having various discussions about me with relations to my work on the Reformation, Luther, and various other topics like the history of atheism and so on. So he did once text me, and then he seemed willing to want to continue the conversation, but I was just a bit cautious because of what had happened before. So, I mean, look, if he wants to collaborate, I'd be happy to do so, but I haven't reached out to him recently. You know, let's just say they are for various reasons. So many of the Catholic channels don't particularly want to speak with me because Yeah, for reasons some of which are, shall we say, rather questionable, right? And yeah, we'll leave it at that. Okay, so let's go on with this. So this is where we ended off last time, permeation, right? Slow and steady wins the race. Now, George Bernard Shaw, we're going to find out, is a political radical eugenicist and someone who should really, he could have been heading up the Nazi party for his beliefs. If you once you start to see what this guy actually believed, and we will get into that. So he's a Fabian member from 1884. He was a Nobel Prize winner. He was a co-founder of the LSE, the London School of Economics and Politics. And he wrote, "We permeated the party organizations and we pulled all the wires or strings we could lay our hands on with the utmost adroitness and energy." So that's a direct quote, right? He's boasting about the fact that these people are pulling all the political strings from within the wings where you don't see them. In 1908, he went further. He wrote that the Fabians had set two tasks. First, provide a parliamentary program for a prime minister converted to socialism. That almost sounds like a religious conversion to socialism, and they would give him a program to follow. So we're going to create a puppet, and we're going to give the puppet the program. Remember, every single Labour prime minister in UK history has been a Fabian socialist, has been a member of the Fabian Society, including this guy here, Keir Starmer. Yes, the Nobel Prizes are definitely biased. Right. And then second, they wanted to make it as easy and matter of course for the ordinary, respectable Englishman, in fact, the whole world, because the Fabian Society, I plan to do another series after this, talking about the political influence the Fabian Society has had globally, even especially in America, because the influence extends and the model that they applied has been copied and adopted. And so they have their tentacles everywhere. You'd be amazed how deep, how far. This is the deep state. These are the actors in the background. And they're all not Jews, just so, by the way. So they wanted everyone to be a socialist. It's easy to be a socialist. In fact, socialism was to be the default. So, Keir Starmer, any thoughts before I go on, guys?
No, continue.
I wonder if the next, if you know who may be the next prime minister, we can just see who is members of the Fabian Society, and then we will know who is going to be the next one.
That is true. Yeah, yeah. Well, half of the current UK cabinet are either sympathizers or members of the Fabian Society. So, yeah, they've got a large pool to draw from. Right, so Trotskyist roots of Keir Starmer, right, from a socialist activist to Fabian leader. In 86, 87, around age 24, Keir Starmer served on the editorial collective of Socialist Alternatives. Now, of course, just like the National Socialists, everyone's going, well, they're not really socialists, you know, and they'll come up with all sorts of wonderful excuses. But yes, he was a socialist, Trotskyist. So the British magazine of the International Revolutionary Marxist Tendency, which is a Trotskyist group. So revolutionary Marxist. He wrote articles and helped shape its hard left direction, criticizing moderate labor policies and advocating radical change. He was involved with the Socialist lawyers, longtime member and secretary in the 80s and 90s of the Haldane Society of Socialist Lawyers. In his magazine, Socialist Lawyer, he quoted Karl Marx approvingly, writing, of course, Karl Marx was, of course, right. Karl Marx was right. Yes, of course. Thanks, Keir Starmer. Any thoughts before I go on, guys?
No.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah. Remember, aim high, vote low. Everyone's got to go. Right, I think that's more election interference. I guess YouTube's going to be unhappy with this one too. Starmer repeatedly described himself as a socialist. In 2020, he stated, "I still see myself as a socialist. For me, it has a very practical application." Now, Starmer sat on the Fabian Society Executive Committee, the first Labour leader in history to do so while running for leadership. He wrote his key vision document, The Road Ahead, as a Fabian pamphlet. And the Fabian Society proudly states that every Labour prime minister has been a Fabian, and Starmer continues that conveyor belt. So Starmer began as a documented Trotskyite activist in the 80s, remains a self-declared socialist, and he rose to power through the Fabian Society's very patient permeation strategy. or shall we say infiltration, slow infiltration. And he entered existing institutions, and they entered in existing institutions, and they normalized socialist ideas from within. So his radicalism, his young radicalism, gave him left-wing credibility, but the Fabian network eventually gave him number 10, Downing Street. And yeah, this is Providence Magazine by Harry Bennett. Fantastic article. Welcome to Starmergrad. Despite appearances, Keir Starmer remains a socialist. And that's September 6th, 2024. So this is quite recent. Any thoughts, guys?
I don't know if anybody else is feeling anxious just about now, or if it is just me.
How so?
Because this is, I don't know, Thunderous, how are you feeling about this? Is it starting to make sense what is happening in the UK?
Oh, absolutely. I found out something else, and I'll probably mention that at the end of the show because I don't think it relates to the material that we're covering, but it's just an interesting something I'm going through at the moment that I picked up. But this doesn't, it makes me anxious for people that do not understand what's going on in the world. That's what makes me anxious for them. The people who just cannot see what's happening, who cannot see behind the veil, as it were. I'm anxious for them because they're the innocent victims that are caught up in this by this deceit. I'm not anxious for myself because I forgive the arrogance, but the biblical narrative has given me a lens for which I view the world. So I don't have a fear. I have more of an expectation of things to get worse, progressively get worse, and then ultimately, you know, where we'll be is where we'll be. I've not hidden the fact that I certainly believe that we're in the last days, and I certainly believe that Daniel's 244 is a reality impending in my lifetime. So these things don't make me anxious. I reiterate, I'm anxious for the people that are not aware as to what's going on.
Yeah, things do look like they're accelerating. That's certain. You know, things do not look like they're slowing down. And yeah, these people from the Fabian Society, Muslims, Freemasons, could they be connected? That's a very good question, Miguel. I'm going to try to answer some of that, at least. We're going to have a look at some of that. But let's just say it's not like they're disconnected from the occult or from Islam. Let's put it that way. We'll get to that as we go. So just like atheists like to claim that atheism is the default, the Fabians wanted socialism to be the default. And of course, to be part of these socialist parties in the USSR, for instance, you had to be an atheist. That's a requirement to be a socialist. Now, they wanted to normalize socialism, make it the default belief, make it so ordinary that questioning socialism seems radical, like questioning the tranny movement will get you in jail, for instance. You know, they wanted to make it so normal that you can be arrested and thrown in jail for asking questions about, you know, does a winky make you a woman? You know, to which the answer is no, it doesn't. So it makes you a far-right extremist to question the agenda. See? Now, this was their plan. This was written down. This was published and distributed. See? Now, historian Margaret Cold explained the system clearly. She did history on the Fabian Society, apparently. Permeation means converting key persons, right, who were in a position to take action. But it was not necessary that these key persons should be members of the Fabian Society. It's also not necessary that when Islam converts key persons, it's not necessary that these people are necessarily Muslims. They just need to be sympathetic, right? So the people doing the work don't need to be members. They just need to be influenced by members, knowingly or unknowingly. And if knowingly, they are sympathetic. Look at the Pallywood phenomenon, all those people so interested in defending Palestine, right? So this is our network with 6,500 people ends up with half the UK government cabinet under their influence. So why did they permeate? Well, so in 1895, they founded the London School of Economics. Any thoughts, guys, before I move?
Yeah, I wanted to ask the question. You're talking about permeating, employing people in a particular role, though they themselves are not necessarily Fabian, but their views lend themselves to Fabian ideology. Now, the first thing that came to my mind is manipulated the education system to steer them away from creation and more into like a Darwinian or some version of evolution, and therefore undermining children's progress at a very young age. By cartoons, primary school, 20 million years ago, David Diplodocus Tyrannosaurus, that lends itself to the Darwinian theory of evolution, that there is no intelligent design. And then when we move forward progressively, as an example, maybe you can correct me on this, Lloyd, people like Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, they may themselves not necessarily have Fabian views, and I don't think that they do. However, their influence and ideological worldview lend themselves to a Fabian agenda.
Yeah, it destroys the bulwark that defends against those views, that they were eroding the defenses. Yes.
Yes.
They're normalizing certain aspects of the ideological framework, and they're also dismantling the ideological defense against it, or the religious defense against it. Yeah. I mean, Dawkins is aware of that. Yeah. So now the socialist left obviously are interested in indoctrination over education. Sidney Webb's stated intention was to teach political economy on more modern and more socialist lines than those on which it had been taught hitherto, and to serve at the same time as a school of higher commercial education. So they are infiltrating the universities, they're infiltrating the education system, they're turning out people who knowingly or unknowingly are sympathetic to their particular worldview. So the school that trained generations of civil servants, economists, and world leaders, including presidents, was founded by Fabians explicitly to push economics leftward, and it's a short walk from Whitehall. In 1913, they founded the New Statesman, and that worked very, very well for them. The New Statesman is extremely influential. They have a YouTube channel, they have social media, they're very powerful and influential. Margaret Haig Thomas again observed that the magazine was read by an enormous number of civil servants and was penetrating right through Whitehall. So now, from India to Singapore, so the reach of the society went well beyond Britain. This is a very simple treatment of this. In the future, I will talk about their deep infiltration into US politics and others. So the reach of the society went well beyond Britain. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, was, in his own words, while studying law in London, vaguely attracted, he said, to the Fabians and socialistic ideas. Nehru wanted the model of democratic socialism which suits Indian traditions and ethos. If you think of communist China, this is Marxism, Marxist socialism with Chinese characteristics, right? You look at different flavors of socialism, everyone adapts it to their particular culture. It's the same general idea, but adapted to that particular person's whims or preferences, but it's the same idea. So, and influenced by the Fabian socialism of Britain, he was of the opinion that parliamentary politics is the means of achieving socialism. His mentor, and this is a very important woman, we're going to discuss her quite a lot later on, was Annie Besant, prominent early Fabian socialist. She was also a theosophist. In other words, she was deeply into the occult and Madame Blavatsky. And of course, she was a Freemason. Did someone ask about Freemasons just a moment ago? Yeah, any comments, guys, before I move?
I'd say all of this quite a basic strategy, right? Like gain influence in whichever way you can, politics, education, fear, threat, money, whatever it takes to gain power. So, and we're still falling for it. Interesting.
And also, it's interesting to note that it's not Jawaharlal Nehru, but also the first Pakistani prime minister who was also.
Oh, we'll get to all of those. Yeah, no, we'll talk about all of them. I just don't want to go into too much depth now, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, it's almost like they're sowing seeds in other parliamentary organizations around the world. So though it's not going to, it probably wouldn't have moved forward with Nehru, but the seed of socialism was sown with Nehru. That would permeate at a later date. Yeah.
This is Annie Besant here at the back, but we'll talk about her a lot. She features later. So India's post-independence economic policy, state-owned heavy industry, regulated private enterprise, the licensed Raj, was all built on Fabian lines. And don't forget, while India's economy is pretty strong for the region, India fell behind the rest of the developed economies by something like 40 years. So there are certain problems, structural problems, because of the introduction of these socialist ideas. But that's outside the scope of this discussion now. So Lee Kuan Yew, the first Prime Minister of Singapore, studied at the London School of Economics. He was on the cover of Time magazine. He later rejected it entirely. He said, like Nehru, I had been influenced by the ideas of the British Fabian Society, but I soon realized that before distributing the pie, I had to first bake it, because socialists distribute the pie. They don't make anything. They give your stuff away, right? So I departed from welfarism, very well identified, because it sapped the people's self-reliance and the desire to excel and succeed. And of course, Britain has fallen hard into welfarism, as is Western Europe. Pakistan and the Public Service Union, even Muhammad Ali Jinnah, founder of Pakistan, Thunderous, was described as an avid member of the Fabian Society. You can see here, a wonderful looking guy, definitely saintly in his white suit. He was a member of the Fabian Society in the early 1930s, although he decided, well, okay, according to this report anyway, evidence suggests he joined to gain credibility for a Labour parliamentary candidacy. So he wanted to be part of the UK government. Why are you allowing foreigners to run the UK government? I have no idea. So one small society in London influenced the governance of India, Singapore, and Pakistan. Those are just 3 examples. Sidney Webb wrote Clause 4 of the Labour Constitution in 1918, the clause that committed the party to common ownership of the means of production. In other words, Marxism. The state will own the means of production. The words that defined Labour for 77 years until Tony Blair edited that and replaced those words using another Fabian pamphlet as his justification for his new strategy. And the BBC's Robert Peston called it an essential tract. So the BBC openly advocated for socialist ideas and Fabian ideas. Obviously, we know the BBC is not neutral. The BBC has been complicit in a number of fraudulent schemes, associations with, shall we say, PDF files and such. Any thoughts before I go on, guys?
I just think it's interesting with Muhammad Ali Jinnah that he is basically the blueprint for Muslims in this country and other countries that we're actually seeing now, for instance, in America, in France, Germany, and in England, that to gain political credibility, they almost have to pretend that they're part of this Labour Party candidacy or left-wing ideology of Fabianism. But in reality, they're just using it as a front to gain traction for themselves.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah, in 2022, Unison, that's the Public Service Union, commissioned the Fabian Society to develop a roadmap for a national care service. Fascinating stuff. And in June 2023, the report was published. And here's the union, Unison, the Public Service Union, and making a national care service from a roadmap to reality. We had one example of one of their pamphlets becoming law, and they've significantly affected the politics and law of the UK. Unison hosted the Fabian Society's National Care Service Summit, bringing together stakeholders to discuss the practicalities of creating a nationalized care service. Fabian Society. Okay, so you can see here they are, these people are advising the Public Service Union. In other words, they are managing the civil service network. Effectively, they are influencing the civil service network. Their ideas are permeating the civil service. These ideas eventually become law. So how did the UK become a socialist welfare state? Well, through a recommendation they wrote in a pamphlet. Of course, it was 81 pages long. There were 48 recommendations designed for Shadow Minister Wes Streeting. In June 2024, the National Care Service appears in Labour's manifesto. Interesting. The Fabian Society has an idea. They pitch it to Unison. Unison tells their people how they're going to go, and then it appears in the Labour manifesto. And in July 2024, and Labour wins. And then, boom, 2 years later, the Fabians' idea is now law. And of course, then they introduce, shall we say, voluntary unalive people who, who feel they just can't go on anymore and so on. So then suddenly you get introduced a medical benefit where you can have yourself permanently deleted by the state. Isn't that just fascinating? Oh, yes.
I was just getting that kind of vibe just about now.
Yep. Villena says the socialist religion is running the public service. Yes. These people are highly influential. And you know what? They're not Jews, because I know everyone's going to go on about the Jew. No, please, just get your head out your ass. These people are atheists. They're socialists. Some of them are probably Satanists. These people are, occultists. So, but this is what they are. And many of them, we'll get into the Islamic connections. For the greater good. Yes, for the greater good. Yes. So then, Beatrice Webb, her 1909 Minority Report to the Royal Commission on the Poor Laws, introducing a national minimum of welfare. The blueprint for the welfare state became the Beveridge Report. This is William Beveridge, who worked for the Webbs. He was an early founding Fabian in 1942, right? And this became the NHS in 1948. That took 6 years. Fascinating. So 1909 to 1942 to 1948, they gained power. So Beveridge later noted that his own recommendations came from the Webbs. You see, so he was influenced directly by the Webbs, who founded the Fabian Society. 39 years from pamphlet to legislation. Now, most think tanks write papers that gather dust on shelves. The Fabians, they write papers that become UK law. Ask yourself, how much influence do they have at the WEF, at the UN, and other organizations or other governments around the world?
Can I comment on that, Lloyd?
Yeah.
Now, do you think that the welfare state is a deliberate tactic by the Fabian Society, just as society is beginning to say, get educated, become more literate?
Impoverish, yeah. Mm-hmm.
To basically create a welfare state that actually regresses the progress that the general society or the people...
It's a drain. It's a public drain. It discourages, as the guy from Singapore said, it discourages innovation. It discourages people from getting off their backsides, and it takes away their motivation because they'll just get money from the government. It takes away industry from people.
Yeah, I've got the book by Thomas Sowell, Social Justice Fallacies. I haven't started it yet, but I think Thomas Sowell touches on the same thing that happened in America as well. So if these things are happening in certain countries, would you suggest, or would you say, or do you have an inclination that maybe the same thing of the Fabian movement was happening in American politics
I will do a series. Look, let's finish this. This might be 3 episodes, I think, on the Fabian Society. When we finish this, I will do additional series talking about how they've infiltrated other governments, especially in the US.
Okay. Forgive me.
Oh, yeah. So I think, yes, the blueprint was set and they simply exported it. Yes. Beatrice, this is London School of Economics. This is supposed to be one of the world's premier economics schools, training statesmen, training people involved at major levels in government. Beatrice Webb, William Beveridge, Poverty and the Minority Report on the Poor Law. So yeah, these people were everywhere. So now down with the patriarchy. Heard of a thing called feminism? Yes. So let's have a look at Havelock Ellis. Now remember, the Fabian Society was an offshoot from the Fellowship of the New Life. And you could be a member of both. All right. So these people were members of both organizations. The Fellowship of the New Life was set up to create a higher ethical and moral standard in people, to make people to be the best that they could be. Right. So let's have a look. Havelock Ellis was a key member of the Fellowship of the New Life, the ethically minded, self-perfecting group, right, to create a higher state of being, a higher state of man, and so on. This was the self-perfecting precursor to the Fabian Society, and he integrated his own radical politics with a deviant approach to human sexuality. This is Havelock Ellis. This is his wife. If you look at her haircut, you might get a certain vibe. Just anybody getting vibes here? H.M. Fogg says the recent raising of the spending on welfare to exceed the tax revenue would suggest the point is to bankrupt the country. Exactly. And then you're also bankrupting your military. So you're weakening the country, you're removing its industry, raising taxes, chasing out the business, chasing away your rich people. So yeah, you are ruining the country deliberately. Yeah. Ellis's primary contribution was moving homosexuality out of the realm of sin or crime into the category of supposedly normal biology. He was normalizing homosexuality and even transgenderism. Remember, he wanted to claim that homosexuals are a third sex. It's part of the natural order of things. It's actually a third sex. And homosexuals, because they're not constrained by the issues with family and children, are actually superior. They have greater intellect. They are more entitled to be teachers, to be educators of the world, to be in charge, because they're the ones who don't have distractions of family and wives, and they can focus on the good of the planet, the good of the world, and therefore homosexuals, transgenders should be elevated to a higher position with greater creativity. We covered that in the last episode. In his book, Sexual Inversion, same-sex attraction was an inborn biological trait, according to him. Because it's a third sex of human. There are actually three kinds of human. He said, no, we no longer have men, women, and Canadians. We have men, women, and homosexuals. Any thoughts, guys, before I go on?
Just the desensitization. I think anybody that's say 50 years and older, or somebody of my generation, sadly I'm 58 years old, will remember that in the 50s and 60s, certain movies in this country started coming out where they touched on the theme of homosexuality. For instance, anybody remember the kitchen sink drama The Leather Boys, which had a homosexual ending? And then you had certain people starring certain, like the Carry On movies, featured two or three predominantly homosexual men. The 70s game shows of the 70s featured predominantly gay men. So it's almost like what was illegal, or behavior that was illegal, the country via the BBC and movies and things was slowly starting to desensitize what was considered an abhorrent behavior or a deviation as now a normality in society. And I think we may touch on it. Yeah, I don't know, because I don't know where you're going with this. Where there was a pivotal moment for me in the 1990s with a certain Channel 4 soap opera, which featured the first lesbian kiss, which for me was, there's your moment. That was the watershed moment of where this perversion will now become a normality. And history has proven to be true on that.
I mean, think of this. The first PM of Pakistan is a Fabian, right? And then the UK gets flooded with Pakistanis, right? And now you've got a serious problem with Deobandis. Now remember, the Taliban are Deobandis. The Taliban are radicals, right? They are hardliners. And now you've got a large minority of Pakistanis who are themselves hardline radicals in the country, because you've got this connection of the Pakistani PM and the UK, who's a Fabian. And now suddenly you've got this. Understand, these influences have results. They have outcomes. They have effects. They have consequences. So one has to wonder, what are the consequences that we don't know about? There's the story that, well, he wasn't really into the Fabians, and then then you see 1 billion Pakistanis coming over. You also see the problem there with that. Any thoughts there, Thunderous? Or okay, well, fine, we can move on. Right. So now he framed homosexuality as being natural, like being left-handed. I'm left-handed, so heck, whatever. And to normalize it as a valid sexual lifestyle. Of course, now they've been trying to normalize PDF philia, right? We've seen that happening. Now, thus, it's okay, of course, if we actively convert your kids. I mean, there was that song out of California with this gay choir, that's the men's gay choir that was saying, "We're coming for your kids." People are actively propositioning kids. People are actively trying to convert straight people. I thought it was something you're born as, but apparently now. So anyway, but it's okay if they actively convert your kids because your kids were born gay. So yeah, there's a little bit of a contradiction there, but yeah, let's not confuse ourselves with the details. So his personal life was as experimental as his academic theories, of course. He had a modern, open marriage. Interesting, like a certain actor that we know who slapped someone in the face at the Oscars. Anyway, so in 1891, he married Edith Lees, a fellow social reformer and a flaming lesbian who was open about her affairs with women. Their marriage was apparently unconsummated, functioning as an intellectual and social alliance. At least if you read the propaganda, they say no, that they were working together as a couple, power couple, influencing, etc., etc. Of course, turns out neither of them seemed very, very happy. But Edith was blending socialism, feminism, and sexual liberation. And she saw lesbianism through a political lens, with the rejection of the patriarchy as necessary for a socialist utopia. So interestingly, something like more than 50% of UK women have a very low view of men. They hate men, effectively, more than... So misandry is alive and well in the UK because these women are raised by people who foisted these ideas on them. And these ideas start here with this woman, Edith Lees, the wife of this guy who founded an organization designed to perfect humanity with greater moral and ethical principles, to bring enlightenment, wisdom, and the perfection of the self through greater wisdom and understanding to the human race. And lesbianism needed to reject patriarchy so that you could have a socialist utopia. You see, so yeah, Ellis, this guy, was also pioneering the study of, as he called it, the study of drugs, psychedelic drugs. But he wasn't taking drugs. He wasn't a drug addict. He was just studying them, just like the SPLC wasn't funding right-wing crazies and terrorists and racism. No, they were just funding informants. True story. So in 1896, he became one of the first Westerners to experiment with mescaline or peyote. Any thoughts, guys, before I go on?
Do you think that this guy, well, these two people were an influence from Alfred Kinsey?
He's probably influenced by them, so it moves on from there. Yeah, the ideas just get picked up and moved on. Yeah.
Yeah, and one comment in the chat, if I can just quickly comment on it. David James Flood has commented that Peter Tatchell is trying to normalize PDF degeneracy in the UK. One person on another channel, Sonia Poulton, has done an excellent expose on, I think she calls it Paedophiles in Parliament. And there's one or two others where I won't mention too much, but I thoroughly recommend her articles and documentaries from a few years ago on these subjects.
Yeah. I mean, they try to call them MAPs, minor attracted persons. Look, to be honest, just turn that right back at them and say minor attracted pedophiles. I mean, they play word games. Just play word games right back. JC?
Yeah, I mean, these two people, you are really, the way that you're describing them, they don't sound like the perfect model couple. Yeah,
No.
they're weird.
They're fucked up.
They are now the perfect modern couple. That's the irony, that they will be seen as the perfect modern couple as they are now. And the comment that was made earlier about MAPs, under the European Court of Human Rights, that is now how pedophiles are referred to, as MAPs under the European.
Just call them minor attracted pedophiles, because they're going to try and call it something else. Just take it back to what it is. Don't let them. Right. So let's have a look at something called man hatred and undynism. Yes, JC, go on, please.
Yes, before you move on. So if that guy was married with this lesbian lady and it was a consummated marriage, I think we can guess how he was swinging, right?
Dude, we're going to have a look at this. We're going to talk about that because he fixes that problem later. But we're going to talk about that now. So, guys, if your kid's in the room, please, you might want to ask them to close their ears or send them out of the room, because I've tried to soften this, but it's a little, it's a little odd. This gets a bit strange. So, okay, so please bear with me. This is, shall we say, adult level discussion. So we're going to talk about man hatred and undynism. So he publishes these findings in the Contemporary Review, and he described heightened color perception and visual jewels, okay, from taking drugs, right? However, he was worried about the long-term effects of drugs on his nervous system. He thought it was damaging his nervous system and his ability to function and think, right? And he feared these experiments might border on abuse or lead to a disintegration of the scientific mind. Now, as for Mrs. Lees here, as for her father was a very cruel man who treated her in a way that made her distrust men all her life. So this whole man hatred, this whole misandry, this whole hatred of men and her turning to lesbianism was based on the fact that her father was apparently a drunkard and a very, very violent man. Her grandfather was a collier who would chase his wife around the room with a carving knife in a drunken rage. So she came from a dysfunctional family, so she hated all men, and she taught women today to hate all men. At 15, which according to Islam, that's like 98 years old in a woman, she met Havelock Ellis and they married 5 years later. That's the two of them together there. At the end of the honeymoon, they lived apart in separate houses. Occasionally they would stay together in the same place, but they got married and then lived in different places. He was, sorry guys, So he discovers later on in life, let's just say, it starts in childhood, but he discovers later on in life that he can get turned on because he couldn't, let's just say the guy couldn't function very well. He had a problem. And then he discovers he can get turned on by watching women urinate. And then he even discussed it with Edith, and she would urinate for him. So, and he stated, no, this is not a fetish. I'm not, weird, strange, fucked up. It's a connection to nature. This is a connection to simply the true wonder and nature, the human nature. It's natural. It's nature of sex. This is just how it is. What do you mean I'm fucked up in the head? This is normal. You see, so it's not a fetish. I'm not a fetishist. We're not crazy. It's anything, guys, before I go on.
I'm good.
Yeah, so anyway. So she briefly worked with the first Labour PM of the UK, Ramsay MacDonald. Isn't that just a sheer coincidence? Briefly, quote unquote. Right? He was the Labour Prime Minister when they both served as secretaries to the Fellowship of the New Life. Started by the guy who's perfecting humanity through perfect behavior and like to see women taking pee. She never knew her mother, who died soon after she was born, but she worshipped her mother's image and always kept a large photograph of her mom on her desk. Phyllis Groscourt, apparently a historian, wrote, Edith's feelings towards her father were akin to hatred. Samuel Lee's was unpredictable and cruel, and he vented his nervous irritability upon his child, leaving her with not only a deep resentment against him, but a suspicion of all men. So she hated the patriarchy because her father and grandfather were both cruel men, and she never knew her mother. After her mother's death, her father married a woman who had no capacity to love or comfort the lonely child. So you can thank feminism, the brand of feminism that is existent today, partly to this young woman here who comes from a broken, dysfunctional family. Hope in crisis, this is literally pissing me off. Yeah, sorry. I'm just trying to keep it, anyway. In 1837, Edith was put into the convent at Manchester, where she was happy, right? So apparently, going to the Catholic convent there, she started to reform and things were going well for her. And she then told her father she wanted to become a Catholic. So out of rage, because of whatever, he immediately moved her to a boarding school in London, and she went off the rails, of course. She then met Honor Brooke, the older daughter of Stopford Brooke, the former chaplain of Queen Victoria. So, yeah. However, he eventually rejected the dogmas of the Church of England and became a Unitarian minister, rejecting the Trinity. I've discussed in the past on the channel the founding of the Unitarian Church, which is like Islam dressed up as Christianity, effectively. These guys are just shills for Islam today. And if you look at the original founding, they are clearly influenced by the Ottoman influence on Central and Eastern Europe. Right, so he becomes a Unitarian minister, rejecting the Trinity. That doesn't make him Christian whatsoever. Right, at Bedford Chapel in Bloomsbury, and Brooke introduced her to other radicals, and this included Percival Chubb, a founder of the Fabian Society. This is one of the original founders of the Fabian Society. Percival Chubb was a clerk and an educator in teaching, born in England and later heavily involved in the ethical culture movement. That's one of these humanitarian, humanist movements where we're going to perfect ourselves because we don't like Christianity, but we're going to create moral systems that are going to make us the best people we can be. Ethical culture. It's just another one of these socialist movements. And he encouraged her to join the Fellowship of the New Life. And according to another member, Ramsay MacDonald, the first Labour PM of the UK, the group were influenced by the ideas of Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson. According to Lillian Federman, the author of Surpassing the Love of Men in 1985, Ellis's wife, Edith Lees, seems to have been a victim of his theories. Remember, she was 15 when she met him. So it seems that she, because of her family situation, distrusted men. So he encouraged her to distrust them more and said, you know what? You're gay, right? So he took her distrust, just like today, when children ask questions, educators go, you know what? You're trans, you see? So it seems that she was a victim of his theories. From his own account, Ellis convinced her that she was a lesbian, what he called a congenital invert. He convinced her she was lesbian, while she believed herself to be only a romantic friend to other women. She was only interested in women at a platonic level, let's say. But he told her, no, 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 you're gay, go be gay, because that's the third sex. And he relates in My Life, that's his biography, that during the first years of their marriage, she revealed to him in an emotional relationship with an old friend who stayed with her while she and Alice were apart. He thus encouraged her to see herself as a lesbian and to regard her subsequent love relations with women as a manifestation of her inversion. He told her to manifest her gayness, just like children today have to manifest their transgenderism. This guy sounds like a, yeah, anyway, your thoughts, guys.
I can sympathize with lesbians. We have a lot of common interests. Sorry, I had to say that.
Yeah. Thunderous, any thoughts?
No comments at the moment, but I dare say I'll have something to say later.
Yeah, but I mean, you guys get the point here, right? I don't have to paint this out, right? It's pretty clear, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely clear. We can see what's going on. It's just that there's nothing really more, because the research is good. There's not really much more I can add.
Yeah. Give me
the only thing I could add, it seems very reminiscent when you look at people that have had a certain bad history and have used their influence to almost project their frustration or history onto other people. It's very reminiscent of reading Vox Day's what was the book? Hang on a minute. The Irrational Atheist, where he goes through certain key figures in atheism, like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Richards, looks at their history and finds that their parents had maybe an affair, or maybe the mother left the father and went off with the vicar.
Yes.
So
yes,
that frustration is like a projection of their hatred against God. Yeah. Of what happened in their family. This seems to be a very similar thing, where there's a hatred and a projection going on that they're influencing and projecting.
Yeah. Notice, people, Muslims are becoming more openly vile, displaying more hatred, just like these Fabians and so on. Look at this Mahmoud Unaz Khan, right? When I go to Pakistan and I hear Pakistani Christians crying, it makes me cry too, but I cry tears of joy and happiness. Now, of course, we are then supposed to consider them the religion of peace. We know, of course, it's religion of piss, but also we're then supposed to be sympathetic to the Palestinians who started a war, got the heck bombed out of them, and we're supposed to be sympathetic to them and think of that as a genocide. Since 1948, their population has gone up by 1,095%, but apparently that's equal to a genocide. Of course, when you start a war and you lose, too bad. Right, we're supposed to be sympathetic to the Iranian regime. No, we're not. So yeah, we're supposed to be sympathetic to Muslims. We know that you simply lie about who you are, and the truth is being exposed. And yeah, when Islam is destroyed, when Islam is exposed for the lie that it is, when the humiliation begins, you know, at some point we're going to we're going to laugh, and we're going to go, well, yeah, we told you so, you know, and yeah, that's it. These people are so disgusting. They really, really are so disgusting. David James Flood says Stalin and Hitler were both viciously beaten as children. This no doubt played a major part in how they became the monsters we know them to be. Right, so let's continue. So the Fabians women's group, Eugenics and peeing for fun. Who doesn't do that? Well, so the free woman discussion circle, right? Free thinkers, right? Atheists. Their numbers, so she starts, there's this whole free woman discussion circle as part of the Fabians, whatever, and their numbers increase fast. Their first meeting room at the suffragette shop, obviously they're now involved in the women's voting rights movement, was too small. So was it second at the Eustace Miles vegetarian restaurant? Of course, the whole vegetarian vegan thing is, of course, also, yeah, let's just say it's not an organic movement. It's kind of a political move for various reasons. The program for the session, July to October 1912, included talks on eugenics by Mrs. Havelock Ellis, because all of these Fabians and all of these people, part of the, you know, the whole new life movement where we're going to perfect ourselves and find the best moral answers to be the best humans we can be, all of them were interested in eugenics, which basically means killing black people and people you think are a waste of oxygen. And also on divorce reform. They were very interested in making it easy to divorce, in other words, to destroy the family. Other subjects were sex oppression and the way out, celibacy, and prostitution, because we need to promote prostitution. That always makes society better. And the abolition of domestic drudgery, because being a housewife is a sin. Rebecca West recalled that at the meetings, everyone behaved beautifully. It was like being in church. In other words, these people hate your society and they want to trample on it. Just like Muslims hate your society and they want to trample on it. At some point, people are going to lose their sympathetic feelings towards these lefties. They're going to lose their sympathetic feelings towards, or at least the restraint they have towards Muslims and lefties. And when that happens, I would only say my caution would be beware the fury of patient people. Anything before I go on, guys?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting about the divorce because if that goes back to 1912. It's interesting because I think it's in the book of Malachi where it says the Lord hates a divorce. And Jesus gave the only grounds, which is in the Sermon on the Mount, that if one person had an adulterous affair, then the innocent mate had the right as to whether to dissolve the marriage or not. So that was the only grounds for divorce. Yeah, and it's made clear in the Bible that God hates the divorce. It's in the book of Malachi. Forgive me, I can't remember chapter and verse. Then when you look at the other subjects, you can see an incremental implementation in the education system about sex. You know, exposing children to sexual behaviors. It's few years ago, there used to be a discussion program, a debate program in England called The Big Question, where they were talking about children being exposed to pornography as a form of sex education. So you could already see these things taking place within the education system and within social circles as far as divorce is concerned.
Yeah. I mean, these people are vile. They're genuinely despicable. This is the kind of, this was, the whole program here is an attack on core fundamental Western beliefs and pillars.
And when you consider prostitution and you think of things that we have now, like OnlyFans, and you think of people like Bonnie Blue, I'm going to have sex with 1,000 men in a weekend. This is what it's come to now, the normalization of sexual intimacy for financial exploitation.
Yeah, because the women are suffering under sex oppression, and so OnlyFans is removing the oppression that women were living under. Prostitution is normalized, and they don't have to do domestic drudgery because that's been abolished. You see, the abolition. So really, they just were creating a depraved society. Now, of course, this is yeah. Go on.
So I'm just going to one last comment. It's the abolition of domestic drudgery. I mean, there are many memes that you can find on Google and images about with a woman looking after the family with children. Okay, like the typical wife at home, and you're calling it oppression, and then you've got the image of a woman under fatigue working in an office, and it's a mocking of a woman liberated. So you can see the two contrasts now, and the impact that has had with the so-called dressing drudgery is that women are now finding the research is only producing figures now where women have gone into education, gone and got further education. Not that further education is a bad thing, but then when you go get further education and you spent say 7-8 years getting your degree, you're not going to go and do a job for 2 or 3 years. You're going to go do a job for 15, 20 years because a degree is an investment in your future. So those women have gone and got a career where they've gone and done say 20 years, and now they're looking back because we're now at that point where these things started in society. They're looking back retrospectively and thinking they've been conned, they've made a mistake, they've missed out so much of their life now.
But it all comes from these completely depraved, messed up people. I mean, let's continue with how Edith Lees, remember these people were, they were perfected, right? They were the people, fellowship of the new life, creating the self-perfected human who would truly express themselves without the restraints of oppressive society. She attempted suicide by throwing herself from the 4th floor. Havelock Ellis then wrote to Edward Carpenter, who was the other flaming gay promoter in the group, who was, anyway, we discussed him last week. Quite what she was feeling and thinking these last few days, I do not know. It was some kind of despair. She has been despondent and self-reproachful, because she did not live up to her ideals for some time past, and she has lost her faith in things and in her spirit. The condition has been fundamentally neurasthenia with mental symptoms, distressing loss of willpower and helplessness. But she's the example that you need to listen to, and you need to, anyway. She was eventually released, but forced back to hospital and died of diabetes in 1916. Ellis died at age 80 in 1939. And just as a point of interest, of course, Havelock Ellis, after, shall we say, and the guy left copious diaries and notes. There's loads of letters that people have available to them. He had an affair with Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger, as you might know, was heavily involved in Planned Parenthood, eugenics. She was very influential in terms of trying to remove the lower races from the world. And, she also promoted what they called the New Woman, a sexual freedom proponent. She wanted think OnlyFans, prostitution. And she had many lovers, apparently. She indulged his fetish because, you see, he discovered later in life he could get turned on when women would have a wee-wee for him, and she would do so for him. And so she indulged his fetish as exploration of what they called varieties of sexual experience. We're not fetishists. We're not crazy. We're just indulging different varieties, the different ways of being. Because also, according to Mr. Ellis, shame was damaging. You should have no shame. Any thoughts before we go on?
And I've got a few comments on my YouTube channel with reference to Margaret Sanger and how she is lauded as a hero by people like Hillary Clinton. That should say everything.
Yeah. So, hopefully you guys are getting an idea for what kind of people, founded the Fabian Society, were involved with the Fabian Society, what kind of ideas were transmitted through the Fabian Society, and the kind of group that the Fabian Society sprang out from. So you can see the kind of ideologies, ethos, messed up personal lives of the people who founded this movement. Right, so evolution over revolution. So the Fabian Society played a massive role in shaping British socialism. So while they were gradualists, they preferred an evolutionary approach, a slow boil the frog approach over revolution. Their intellectual framework is deeply intertwined with Malthusian dogma. Someone mentioned Malthus earlier. So early Fabians accepted the Malthusian premise that unchecked population growth would outstrip the food supply and resources, leading to societal collapse. They believed a socialist state could only survive if it managed population growth. So while Karl Marx detested Thomas Malthus, the Fabians argued that even under socialism, a high birth rate among the unfit or the extremely poor would drain the collective resources of the state. Now, of course, now they're looking to have as many births as possible amongst the unfit because they probably want to drain the collective resources of the state. The Fabians were obsessed with what they called national efficiency. They viewed the slum populations of London as a biological threat to the British Empire. If the population grew without state supervision, the quality of the national stock would decline. Of course, we have a group in Germany that started in Germany. They were called the National Socialists, the National Socialist Workers' Party, or shall we say the National Socialist Labour Party. And they were also very interested in preserving the quality of the national stock. And now we've got the Fabian Society also very concerned about the quality of the national stock, if you get my meaning. Any thoughts, guys, before I go on? JC, anything from you?
Yeah, what I would say is that any organization you could understand if they start at the beginning trying to do certain things and say they are okay at that time, or they try. Basically, after a while, it turns out those things are not okay, and they can change tactics and then say, okay, we have gone a bit crazy there for a few decades. Let's change back to normality. But it doesn't look like that is what happened. It looks, you're painting a picture that this was how it started, and it's starting to make sense the situation where we are at. And it's not because they've done a complete U-turn and they have different belief systems, but because they have done a very good job at implementing some of those very weird belief systems into today's world.
Yep. Yeah. Agreed. So Fabians were among the earliest political groups to advocate for the artificial restriction of the birth rate. Annie Besant was a theosophist. In other words, she was a follower of theosophy, founded by Madame Blavatsky, complete Gnostic and occultist. She was a prominent early Fabian. And of course, she was the author of a book called The Beauties of Islam, because she wanted the world to understand the beauty of Islam. And she was a pioneer in the Malthusian movement, famously standing trial for publishing a pamphlet on contraceptives. Now, Fabianism and Malthusianism became eugenics. Sidney and Beatrice Webb, George Bernard Shaw, and H.G. Wells believed that the state should discourage reproduction among those that they deemed subnormal or unproductive. So from national efficiency, if you were kind of lazy, you were unproductive. And they need to discourage your reproduction because they wanted to ensure that the population remained manageable and of high quality. The beauties of Islam. We'll get into that later. We'll have a look at that some more. But the beauties of Islam, so you've got, first of all, you had Mr. Shaw speaking of Europe really needs to welcome Islam, and Europe really needs to become sympathetic and in fact really just become Islamic. It would be great because they've got such a wrong view, and now you've got this woman who's also very much involved in these organizations, and you need to understand the beauties of Islam. Very much so. No, not much chance for the handicapped. Exactly. So they push the low birth rate, and they push to replace Western populations with Islam. So the Fabians were very concerned with the differential birth rate. So the educated middle classes were having fewer children, while the poor, what they call the residuum, the ones who were left over, the dregs, the bottom of the barrel, they were having too many. So this reverse selection, they said, would lead to a society of dependence that a socialist economy could not support. George Bernard Shaw combined Malthusian concerns with Nietzsche's philosophy. The state should replace haphazard. In other words, letting you choose who you marry and how many kids you have. That's haphazard. You need to have a scientifically managed system that would produce a Superman. Of course, there was a group in Germany that wanted to create the Übermensch, to replace the Untermensch, the under person with the super person, the super. Holy moly, this sounds a little bit like what was happening in Germany, just a little bit, just tiny little bit. And thus you would ensure that the population growth was qualitative rather than just quantitative. Thomas Malthus, was a Church of England clergyman, of course, the broken Church of England. And he originally suggested moral restraint or celibacy was the solution to overpopulation. The Fabians said, no, this is unrealistic because we're sexual deviants and perverts. And they proposed state intervention, including family allowances that favored the fit and state-funded clinics, abortion clinics, to limit the unfit. So the Fabian-Malthusian synthesis influenced the 20th century social reform movement. By framing poverty as a problem of population management, they helped justify the creation of the modern welfare state as a mechanism to monitor, educate, and control the living conditions and the reproductive habits of the poor. Yeah, this is just all very broken.
Yeah, and if you look at sorry.
Go on, please.
I was going to say, if you look at Thomas Malthus, there's a certain irony that he covers. He's a Church of England clergyman because he's talking about moral restraint in order to reduce overpopulation. Yeah, as a clergyman, he should be aware that in Genesis 1:28, God himself says to mankind, fill the earth and subdue it. So Thomas Malthus is actually working against God. And then he turns around and says about people that are unfit. It's interesting because Thomas Malthus should be aware of 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18, where God turns around and says, I chose the weak things of the world, the things looked down upon, meaning human beings, and I would exalt them. It's interesting that he himself was directly working against God, just on those two verses alone.
He's, let me just check something. Okay, so moving on. So so H.G. Wells, the War of the Worlds, the Birds, and so on, that guy, right? he was a one-time Fabian, and he took Malthusian ideas to a global scale. He argued in his writings that a world state, a one world government, wasn't. He's not a Jew, by the way, just so you know, was necessary to control the global population and distribute resources scientifically, preventing the Malthusian catastrophe of global famine and war. See, Malthus wanted to abolish poor laws to let nature take its course. The Fabians wanted to expand the state to manage the population scientifically, which is like what the atheists and the socialists wanted, which was scientific population management, which included gas chambers and various things. Thank you, Shoshana. Very much appreciated. Yeah, you've been shadow banned. Oh man, that's sad to hear. Yeah. I'm so bummed I missed the first hour. Well, catch up at double speed or something, or 1.5. Yeah, so New World Order by H.G. Wells is essential reading. I didn't know he wrote that. Okay, so how does 1.6% run a country? So 6,500 Fabians make up just 1.6% of Labour's 400,000 apparent membership. They are 1/3 of the Parliamentary Labour Party, which is 141 MPs. They're more than half of the cabinet, right? So they are, who are all former or current Fabians. Key figures are, well, Angela Rayner, David Lammy, Ed Miliband, Yvette Cooper, Wes Streeting, Pat McFadden, Bridget Phillipson, and of course this thing, I'm not sure, this is either Bigfoot, a Guni Gugu, or, no, apparently there's a name, Shabana Mahmood. But yeah, you've got this thing here, this lost-looking dude, this guy who can't seem to remember his name, and this dude who's responsible for energy policy who doesn't know how to eat a burger, and this thing, which is, I think it's a Guni Gugu. So yeah, any thoughts before I go on, guys?
We're screwed, basically. Yeah. What do they have to do in order to be part of the Fabian Society? Do they have to do any rituals? Do you know anything about that?
Say again, please. Do they?
What do they need to do in order to join the Fabian Society? Do they have to sign a contract in blood or something weird?
No, it's apparently a respectable organization, but I mean, they're socialists. I don't know, apparently it's a very respectable, but remember, you don't have to join them. As long as you are sympathetic to them, they influence people. They don't, they control, they don't own necessarily.
Is it a case of where certain human beings show a certain inclination or a certain sort of like headhunted, as it were, they're monitored, chaperoned?
Say that again, Thunders. You faded in and out. Can you just repeat that from the beginning?
Yeah, I was just wondering, would you think that it's more of a selection process where certain human beings that go into politics show a certain inclination or direction or a viewpoint, and they're monitored for several years, maybe, and then if that worldview continues or that inclination or viewpoint is manifested in the things they do and they show a consistency, they are then sort of like invited to join the inner chamber, as it were, of Fabianism? Would you say that that's probably a way of looking?
I would say, yeah. I mean, it's like, yeah, like someone who shows certain inclinations in Islam, and then they groom them to become a, you know, jihadi. You know, yeah, these people are all corrupt. Yeah, I mean, yeah, they will be monitoring people. They'll be promoting people. They'll be, remember, they started with the London School of Economics, right? They started with their little social groups, their reading clubs, whatever the heck they had. Now they simply just teach them from school, from preschool. What the heck? Now they're just introducing everyone into socialism from 3 years old. You know.
Absolutely. I think the education system is where it all starts now. They've infiltrated government in all appropriate departments, along with the BBC, and you can see a clear pattern, in my estimation. It starts at the scientific level with evolution. You know, children now, so parents now use the children, the television as a babysitter for the TV. So they shove their children in front of the TV, and the children are fed like cartoons that give or portray dinosaurs at 65 million years old, or they're listening to Uncle David Attenborough talk about animals this evolved here and over millions of years that evolved there. So using authority against parents to undermine their faith in an objective moral values, and a theocracy and religion, or the biblical narrative, and then as they get older, they start inculcating them in at a tender age about sexual education, and then when
it's indoctrination, it's not education; it's all indoctrinations. And yeah, Someone asked here in BC, Canada, parents of disabled children are getting letters suggesting MAID, the medical assistance in death option. Yeah, because there's the Fabian Society in Canada. They're all over the place. These ideas have become legion, as it were. That they're not restricted to the UK. Please understand. Through one form or another, these people are everywhere.
Yeah, Canada is the birthplace of the sickness of state-assisted suicide. Now, it's taking the lead in things like you can have state-assisted suicide in Canada for depression, PTSD. PTSD was recently administered to a 23-year-old girl in Spain. Addiction, homelessness. You know, you can have state-assisted suicide now. And the interesting thing is when you start looking at the ages of the people who are opting for it, I think they did something like 17 or 1800 execution. I call them executions. Let's not use soft terms for it.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into that. I mean, it's not really. It's just I just want to introduce it. I don't want to get too deep into that particular topic right now. I mean, just that we know it's a real thing, and it comes from these guys. And also, they may not be called the Fabian Society in your country. It could be called the David Wells Society or the John Smith Organization. They come under different names, but the same suit, you know, different suit, same contents. You know, hope you don't mind, Thunderous. I just don't want to get too bogged down on
no, of course not. I understand. I absolutely understand. It's your show, and you're quite right to mention it.
Yeah, Eva saying a friend of hers is convinced that the Zionists use all these societies in Islam to kill Christians. I mean, Christians, the only place Christians are safe in the Middle East is in Israel. It's the only democracy. There's not a single, not one Islamic democracy, not one. Not a single Islamic country has become a democracy. All of them have the worst human rights records. I mean, they're up there with South Korea, Russia, and any Muslim country you like. The only ones that have, shall we say, generally positive behavior are countries like, say, the UAE, which I lived in for 11 years, where they suppress the Sharia. They actively don't implement a lot of it. Now, they do for their people. They keep it very quiet, but it's still there. There's an undercurrent. You don't necessarily see it, but they suppress these things. So, yeah, I mean, so Eva, yeah, your friend, I don't know if you can change your friend. He might be dyed in the wool at this point. All you can do is talk to his circle, put your message out there. Look, there are people that are supposedly friends of the channel, and when they say, you know, Candace Owens is amazing, Candace Owens is right, and you know, and Charlie Kirk's wife clearly had him assassinated, and she's clearly, and stuff like that, and I disagree with them, they get angry with me, you know. Now, these people are good Christians, they go to church every day, every week, whatever. These are great Christians, but because I disagree with them on Candace Owens, and I think Candace Owens is out of her freaking mind, I become the bad guy in the movie, and they don't want to support the channel, and you know, I get told where to get off at that point. Or because I don't support this particular YouTube channel, or I dislike a particular video because it's some crazy Gnostic who's pushing some crazy theories, conspiracy hell, and I disagree with it. And I say, look, I'm sorry, but if you look at this, this is clearly wrong, because lots of people write to me about all sorts of whacked up nonsense, and I'll disagree, and then they don't support the channel, and I become the bad guy. I become the asshole. This happens all the time, and I am, even though I've been friendly with some of these people for a long time, at what point do I lie to maintain a polite facade? I mean, I'm going to say, no, sorry, that's wrong. These are the things I do on the channel. It's all, you're welcome to the research. Check for yourself, right? I think you guys have followed me for a long time. I only report what I can verify and document, right? What is documented. So yeah, you can't change him. People are going to be upset with you, but at some point, maybe they're not your friend anymore. I don't know what else advice to give. You can try and sit down and convince them, but remember, the people who hate Jews hate the people who give you the Bible. They hate the people who gave you Jesus. They hate the people who give you the apostles, right? There's a disconnect there. There's a moral disconnect. There's a historical disconnect. These are broken people. Yuri Bezmenov was right. You can't fix them. You need to view them as the enemy. Put them in the enemy box. At some point, you have to understand they are enemies. They are destructive. They may not, in all other aspects, be insane, but the problem is they are corrosive. They're an acid chipping away at the rational basis of society. You cannot reach them until it affects them personally, until something harms them personally. let's say their daughter gets raped by a migrant, then maybe they'll change their minds. But even then, often it doesn't, oddly enough. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that point, Thunderous or JC, that you want to say here?
Well, about how to help, I don't know, but I would say that a good rule of thumb is if you say a sentence out loud and it sounds like it's something that the Muslim Brotherhood would say, then the opposite is true. That is a very good thing. Every time that they say these people are doing that thing, no, it's always them. So this thing happens a lot.
Yeah. Yep. So, okay. So the Red Prince. Now, this is the Fabian Society. Here's the Red Prince in January 25. Now, for the UK followers, of course, this will make more sense to you. The Society appointed a new general secretary, a guy called Joe Dromey, right? The publication Labourist dubbed him one of Labour's Red Princes. Now, here you're looking at a dynasty forming. This is multi-generational power, right? He's the son of Harriet Harman, who served as a Labour MP for 42 years and as a deputy leader, and the late Labour MP Jack Dromey. So you've got an entire family dynasty here that are involved. And these people, she's been with them for 42 years. So she's been beating their drum or marching to their tune for 42 years. The organization operates on an annual income of supposedly just £811,000, with a grand total of 16 staff members. Yet they run the entire UK. They influence the entire UK. So what happens when someone tries to take the Labour Party in a direction that the Fabians don't approve of? This is plans for power, Fabian ideas for transforming Britain. I thought these guys are not the government, but they've got plans for power and how they're going to transform Britain for a weak organization with no, what's crazy, right? People tell me, the Jews were kicked out of 973 countries over the last 16 billion years. And then the same breath, they'll turn around and say the Jews control everything. They're all powerful. They run every government. If they ran every fucking government, how are they being thrown out of every fucking country? Right? I don't see Muslims being murdered in New York, but there are Jews being killed there. You don't see Muslims being murdered by gangs of roving Jews in Australia, but it's going the other way. You don't see that happening. You don't see gangs of roving Jews going around murdering, but you see Muslims doing it. So yeah, look, reality, people are just messed up. These people are broken. They're damaged. Their ability to determine reality is clearly damaged. These people are not able to process the facts properly. They couldn't care about the facts. Their feelings don't care about the facts. They are cognitively damaged. What can you do with people like that? They until they snap out of that spell, that hypnotic spell they're under, they're a threat. They are a problem. They're toxic. They're corrosive. They are stones in the gears. They're a spanner in the works. They're a problem. So yeah, unfortunately, you're dealing with this really difficult situation. And yeah, well, what do you do with people like that? It's just crazy. Sorry, guys, any thoughts before I move on?
Let me just add that when we read this thing from the Muslim Brotherhood, their plans, there was a very, very good plan, but because of the internet, that has been completely derailed. I think something similar may happen as well with things like this, like the Fabian Society. These are things that people have never heard about because it's not on, they are not going to put it on the BBC. But all of this nonsense that they have been programming the population with, now people are asking questions. They're actually starting to go online. They're starting to learn. So it's possible that the internet will not only cause the end of Islam during our generation, but lots of other organizations who have been, trying to control the world and doing a very, very poor job with it.
Whilst I agree with JC, I think what's happened is because of the internet and the access to information, which wasn't around 100 years ago, it's in my estimation, it's actually accelerated the plans. In my lifetime, I'm seeing things accelerate exponentially, disproportionate with how you'd expect society to move in certain directions. So whilst I agree with JC, I just see an acceleration because of the internet.
Yep, I agree with you.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, look, I've lost friends, quote unquote. I've lost supporters of the channel. I've lost money, okay, because I haven't pandered and supported people's conspiracy theories. Because I've disagreed on principle and on the facts with people's claims, from Candace Owens to, good grief, the emails and things I used to get. I've blocked people because I'm just sick and tired of getting the craziest emails and messages and such. So,
yeah, but Lloyd, Elijah was persecuted as well for telling the truth. Jesus was persecuted for telling the truth. This is the persecution or loose. Jesus himself said that he who has more love for blah, blah, blah than me is not worthy of me. This is just a byproduct of telling the truth, dude. Stick with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an objective truth. These are facts. People can research this. You know, I mean, the things that people would be making debunking videos on my stuff if I was routinely just making things up. I'm sure I make small mistakes. Everyone does, but it's not like it's not like I substantially do so. So anyway, plans for power, Fabian ideas for transforming Britain. So let's look at Jeremy Corbyn. In 2016, 24 frontbenchers resigned from his shadow cabinet to force him out. The Fabian wing of the Labour Party was openly at war with the Corbyn left. Andrew Harrop, the Fabian General Secretary. That's Andrew Harrop who wrote this here. Okay, plans for power, Fabian ideas for making Britain in the image that we want, published a paper arguing Labour under Corbyn had no roadmap for winning back lost voters. Starmer himself resigned from the shadow cabinet that year, and for his loyalty, Mr. Starmer became Prime Minister. Within 4 years, he was the leader, the first Fabian executive member to hold the position. In autumn of 2023, Harrop published Plans for Power, a document compiling the Society's policy ideas from early years to pensions, planning reform to industrial strategy. So yeah, the Fabians have got their ideas in government. After the election, the Fabian Society stated, in their own words, Labour's manifesto was shaped by Fabian values and filled with Fabian values. The Fabian Society is running the UK, and more than just the UK. So let's talk about George Bernard Shaw. Yeah, Candace is unhinged. So, Shoshana says, thank you, Shoshana. I appreciate the positive words. And Catherine as well. But says, money and power seem to motivate these haters to make millions out of hate. They change their views according to how much money they can get. Look, just so you know, on this channel, I don't often ask for donations. You know that I don't. I don't make a scene out of it. I don't talk about shares. I do sometimes, but it's not like I'm doing it every 5 minutes. And I make a third, okay? Even though my channel has tripled in size over the last year or so, my revenue is 1/3 of what it used to be. Now, I have not made more in terms of YouTube revenue than $470, the highest it's ever been from YouTube revenue. $470, and I did that once, and I had a little bit less one time. Now I'm averaging about $150, just so you guys know, maybe 200. So 250. So in other words, I used to have I was moving towards $500 a month, considering the amount of hours of research, considering the time and effort I put in. I'm not making Lamborghini or Ferrari money. I didn't have a car for 7 years here in Poland. I just bought a car a year ago. Finally, after 7 years. So it's not like I'm making YouTube money and making bank here, right? So yeah, but I believe integrity and principle are important. I believe telling the truth, verifiable, documented proof, evidence, like a detective would put together. I think that's important, right? So our touch point is reality, documented reality, rather than conspiracy theories or things we'd like. So yeah, I'm losing money by doing what I'm doing. I'm not making a huge amount of money. So therefore, I do appreciate the donations I get, because it's a lot of time and effort that goes into this. And then I do have to take abuse as well, right? So yeah, just understand, yeah, I'm not making millions like Candace. Maybe she was being funded by the SPLC. Who knows, right? I certainly am not being funded by them. Guys, any thoughts before I go on?
Yeah, just a quick response to Unapologetic Zionist 1948 says, Lloyd, I should have a slightly go off topic question. Do you think we should avoid smartphones like the Amish community to avoid them? Smartphones are convenience, but also be a big source of evil. My personal response to that would be there's use and there's abuse. A smartphone has abuse. I think that if you have a job and you have a bank account and all these things, you're pretty much via a smartphone tied into the system like many other people are. So that's use. I think it's more about monitoring abuse of the phone.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost impossible to get away from privacy violations these days. Yeah, but that's off topic. I mean, let's examine that another time. Okay, so George Bernard Shaw, let's talk about him. So we'll go another 10 minutes or so, guys.
Yeah.
So the people who designed Britain's welfare state, the system built to protect the most vulnerable, simultaneously and openly advocated for eugenics, forced sterilization, and what they called lethal chambers. Just like the guys in Germany had chambers filled with gas, these guys had chambers filled with, I believe, gas. Good grief, what a coincidence. Strange, these Fabians. Gas-filled chambers. And the elimination of the people they considered unfit. Now, these are direct quotes published under their real names in mainstream outlets. George Bernard Shaw wrote, "The only fundamental and possible socialism is the socialism of the selective breeding of man." So obviously here we're going to hear about the fact that he's doing socialism all wrong. That wasn't real socialism, but apparently socialism requires selective breeding to achieve the superior man, the new man, right? Just like the gay crazy woman wanted the new woman. You know, Shaw declared this in the appendix to his 1903 play, Man and Superman, specifically within the Revolutionists' Handbook. So they were incremental revolutionaries. Now, true equality, socialism was impossible without biological improvement. Wasn't there a certain political party in Germany that wanted to improve the biological quality of humans and get rid of the Untermensch guys? Or am I missing something from history here?
Straight from the same playbook.
Yeah, but this is the Fabian Society. They're not Nazis at all. JC, any thoughts from you?
No, I'm just kind of shocked. It looks too many parallels. Yeah.
Yeah. So a higher type of human creature was required for a functional socialist society, advocating for the elimination of those deemed inefficient. When they say eliminate, they don't mean you get knocked out of the game, right? This is not that kind of elimination. This is kind of permanent. You don't not pass go. You don't get $200. You go straight to the coffin. Deemed inefficient or unfit to build a better world. The Superman, the Übermensch, was a superior human, and he would emerge through directed evolution. Man's playing God here, overcoming the limitations of humanity. So, leftist eugenics. I bet you did not see that coming. Bertrand Russell, wonderful name, everyone loves him, blah, blah, whatever. All these top names, turns out these people are monsters. He believed that things would have made even Nazi Germany. So he believed things that would have made even Nazi Germany's eugenicists blush, right? He suggested that the state issue color-coded procreation tickets, and anyone who dared to breed with holders of a different colored ticket would face a heavy fine. That sounds a lot like apartheid, enforced apartheid. You can't breed with people of the wrong color. In this case, wrong colored ticket, but this just sounds broader than just cross ethnic fertilization, but anyone we don't like. So this way, the high caliber gene pool of the elite would not be muddied by proletarian or foreign muck. Just so you guys know, I'm foreign muck. I've got the shade of foreign muck. What do you guys think of that so far?
Dude, I've got as much muck as you. You've seen my face. Pretty as
I've seen your face. But you're a good-looking man, so we'll take it at that. We'll leave it at that. Yeah, but the National Socialists were not true socialists. Exactly, yeah, Emmanuel. Yeah. So the New Statesman, the New Statesman is still around today. It's still highly influential in Parliament in the UK. It's read. It's got social media. It's followed around the world. They agreed. July 1931. The legitimate claims of eugenics are not incompatible with the outlook of the collectivist or socialist movement. On the contrary, they would be expected to find their opponents among those who cling to individualistic views of parenthood and family economics. People who want to manage themselves, who want the government to leave them the fuck alone. Those people are the problem. Those people need to listen, and maybe they need to be eugenicized. So yeah, this is what we're dealing with. These are the Fabians, people. Welcome to the people with greater morality than you. People who are going to decide how you need to run your life, and they are slowly ramping up to actually implement these things, I'm sure. Eugenics then took root in Britain, pushed and argued by the left, the same left that keeps trying to murder certain presidents, and so on and so on and so on. And contempt for ordinary people and outright racism were two of the defining creeds of British socialism. Especially ordinary people who just wanted to have the government leave them alone, decide who they want to marry, how many kids they want, and just live their lives like normal people. But apparently that was not acceptable to the socialist left. Eugenics, the skeleton that rattles loudest in the left's closet, by Jonathan Friedland. And that's in The Guardian. I'm going to bring that up. That is in The Guardian. So this is not random. This is in The Guardian. And he writes here, thus George Bernard Shaw could write, the only fundamental and possible socialism is that of selective breeding of man, right? The overthrow of the aristocrat has created the necessity for the superman. Bertrand Russell, you know. So yeah, and so on and so on and so on. That's how that goes. And of course, eugenics didn't just happen in Germany and Scandinavia, and it's not part of the right, it is strictly part of the left. And of course, everything begins with Charles Darwin. So now, the final solution. The co-founder of the London School of Economics and Politics and the New Statesman, the designer of the Fabian window, really wanted to cleanse the human race. He writes, George Bernard Shaw tells us, on the lecture to the Eugenics Education Society reported in the Daily Express March 4th, 1910, a part of eugenic politics would finally land us in an extensive use of the lethal chamber. I know a group that used the lethal chamber. They were in Germany. They were around from roughly 1933 when they gained power, and then they were finally kicked out around 1945 after Germany was bombed to pieces. And they used lethal chambers. But the Fabians, you see, they really, really wanted to use lethal chambers. They just haven't gotten around to them yet. A great many people would have to be put out of existence simply because it wastes other people's time to look after them. Is your grandma causing you a lot of problems? Is she taking up a lot of your time? Does she work? Does she eat a lot of food? Does she take up space? Does she contribute for that? No, well, we have a lethal chamber for her. I'll pause there for a moment. You guys?
When you're reading this, I was trying not to get angry. I mean, just that comment there. You think about Jesus, where he fed people, he healed people. Jesus himself says, "Comfort the depressed souls. Come to me, all you who are toiling and burdened." And when you look at Genesis, just before the flood, God himself says he looked at the heart of men, and their heart was towards wickedness all the time. And then the flood came and removed these people. Obviously, God has feelings as well. God gets angry. When you look at, say, Sodom and Gomorrah and their wickedness, when you look at the Canaanites and their wickedness, you know, in all of these discussions, we're also forgetting how God himself feels about what he's watching, because he's been watching it for thousands of years, how he feels when he sees human beings actually act and go against him, against his own creation. How must he feel in all of this when he watches these things take place? Yeah,
it's disgusting. Yeah, I mean, this is anti-Christian. This is anti-Christian to the core. Oh yeah, so JC, anything before I go on? I'll probably finish around here. Maybe do one more slide, we'll see. But
they can't fight God. This is the only way.
They're defying God. They don't not believe in God. They defy God. That's it. They are defiant. Yeah.
And just one more comment before I make, because the comment is moving away. An unapologetic Zionist. I recommend. It's interesting you should say that about food, because there's a book that I just started reading, which is called Ultra Processed People. And it's interesting to note that I thought processed food was only a relatively new thing. And this is related, Lloyd. processed food actually goes back 150 years. So I'm beginning to see a correlation by all the sciences that you're mentioning here, Lloyd, and also some other developments with reference to processed food, which
I mean, this is why in the US, I mean, you've now got what's his name, the new Minister for Health. I mean, he's making radical changes, so kudos to him. Ja, Emmanuel says, diese Erbkranke kostet der Volksgemeinschaft 60.000 Reichsmark auf Lebenszeit. Volksgenosse, das ist auch dein Geld. So yeah, these sick people basically, you know, are costing society 60,000 Reichsmark over the lifetime of the person. This is your money, you know. Do you want, take the money and let's get rid of these sick people, you know, kind of thing. Yeah, let's just do that. Yeah. So the moment we face it frankly, this is George Bernard Shaw. The moment that we face it frankly, we are driven to the conclusion that the community has a right to put a price on the right to live in it. If people are fit to live, let them live under decent human conditions. But if they are not fit to live, kill them in a decent human way. Is it any wonder that some of us are driven to prescribe the lethal chamber as remember the lethal chamber, if you saw part 1 and remember, the lethal chambers were for lower classes of animals, like dogs, too many dogs on the street, too many rabbits, I don't know, too many foxes in the field eating the chickens, whatever. They said, no, the lethal chamber is just for animals. And now suddenly the lethal chamber is no longer. In fact, it's almost exclusively for people, and animals are no longer. See, they'll introduce the idea and say, no, it's really for animals. And then it turns out you're the animal they want to get rid of. So we are driven to prescribe the lethal chamber as the final solution. Yeah, the final solution, the lethal chamber, for the hard cases which are at present made the excuse for dragging all the other cases down to their level. And the only solution, you see, killing them is the only solution that will create a sense of full social responsibility in modern populations. Don't you agree? Any thoughts, JC? Yeah.
Well, I'm having this weird case of deja vu because all of these things, I have seen it in documentaries. I've seen Jordan Peterson talking about people who acted in this manner, and they are not remembered as the good guys. Before I made that comment that it looks like, well, Nazi Germany was copying from these people. It almost feels like they copied from these people. Like this guy came with the idea of doing that way before the Second World War. This is insane.
Yeah. These guys, people don't know them. These people are running the UK government. This sewer birthed everybody that is currently running the UK government. And how many others? God knows how many others. I mean, when I get to the US, these people have infiltrated the US. Make no mistake. This is the deep state. This is the deep state. These people, this is the entire bureaucracy that has invaded like termites into the governments of the West. These are the people that founded all of that. It's disgusting. It's truly disgusting. Yeah, that Spanish lady, that was shocking. Yeah, that was shocking. Okay, just so, look, I don't want to get into stories about Catholicism here because I'm going to have to briefly. I have not once seen a claim made by anybody about Catholicism or the Pope that is in any way, shape, or form accurate. They're all lies of some type. For instance, there is the constant claim that the Pope has created a prayer room for Muslims, specifically or whatever. No, there's a group of scholars, I believe it's a group of Muslim scholars who came there to study specific documents, ancient documents in the Vatican Library, and they asked if they may pray. And they were granted a single room, a space for while they are there, for that particular group of scholars to use that space to pray while they are there. It is not, oh yeah, you guys can all come in hordes into the Vatican and pray. That's just one example of a very simple lie that is told. There is not a single thing that I've ever seen the Catholic Church can do that anyone reports honestly. I'm not even a Catholic, right? Understand. But if you're going to lie, I'm going to challenge you. And this is where I've lost friends. People I thought were friends. But you see, people don't want to talk about the fact that the Protestants literally aided, abetted, funded, trained, provided intelligence, and fought with. You know, the Crusades, right? Because Muslim invasions, well, then you had the Muslim invasions into Europe. The Protestants aided, abetted, funded, trained, armed, gave intelligence to, and fought with the Muslims to invade Europe, right? People have no idea how deep this goes, how ugly this is, how Protestant history is lied about as much as Muslim history. Protestant history is as dishonest, ugly, and disgusting as Islamic history. It is filthy. And the focus is always attacking Catholicism and lying about it extensively. And then, of course, whitewashing and failing to talk about the deeply ugly things. And I will be talking about those. That is coming. Protestants are not going to like it. You're going to be upset with me. But Protestant history is filthy. It is as filthy as anything in Islam, right? Martin Luther, I think I've covered him, 50 hours on this channel, is a disgusting man. The reformers were all liars, Gnostics. So I'm really, really not happy about people misrepresenting Catholicism and then furthermore lying about Protestant history. And then, of course, we can get into, because you see, you've got a big target. You've got this big group called the Catholic Church. They're an easy target. Then you've got millions of contradictory Gnostic groups that call themselves Protestant Christians, that none of which can agree what the Bible says, what Jesus brought. None of them can agree on anything. They all contradict and lie and, are incredibly confused while claiming the Bible has no contradictions. The Holy Spirit leads into all truth and has no contradictions. Meanwhile, they contradict like a bunch of maniacs on drugs. And and they don't want to examine their own history. This is why I've invited so many Protestants to come on and speak about the founding of their groups. Read through what Luther wrote. Read through, for Baptists, to read through what the founder of the Baptist movement was, excuse my French, a fucking lunatic. So was Martin Luther. This is why they don't want to come on and talk about it, because these people are embarrassing and humiliating, and then you call yourselves Christians and you don't look at your own history. So can we just drop that? Because he's got his reasons, but let's not exaggerate them. Let's talk about that at a different time. But if you want to talk about friendly with Islam, then you're going to have to talk about Protestantism. And I'd like to see some facts on that score. I'll leave that there for now, but really. So, any comments before I go on?
No, I'm good.
I'm cool.
No, this is, so this is something I'll talk about. But look, we can all I have problems with popes. There are certain rabbis who are promoting Islam and saying things like, no, it's the Muslims are only angry because they've been invaded. That's not true. Those rabbis are wrong. They're lying. They're ignorant fools. Certainly, there are Catholics who are ignorant fools. But think about this. I want to ask you one question. When it came to the wars that pushed the Muslims out of Europe, who fought those wars? I'll tell you, the Pope and the Catholics. You know where the Protestants were during all of those major wars? A, they didn't exist, or B, they were at home flossing their cat, or C, they were literally fighting with the Muslims, right? The Dutch, the English, rather Muslim than a papist, rather Muslim than Catholic, right? Collaborators, they were collaborators, just like you had collaborators with Islam. So with the Nazis, they were collaborators. So but anyway, let's go on. So this is H.G. Wells. I'll finish on this slide. This is H.G. Wells and Socialism's Principles, 1908. This is the Richardson lethal chamber. I showed this before. Painless extinction of lower animal life. But we've just learned these are not dogs and cats and bunnies. These are people we don't like. That's lower animal life. Because of my complexion and Thunderous's complexion, we would be considered lower animal life. That these people wouldn't like very much. So the fundamental idea upon which socialism rests is the same fundamental idea as that upon which all real scientific work is carried on. It is the denial that chance, impulse, and individual will and happening constitute the only possible method by which things may be done in the world. In other words, don't have people have freedom, you need to control them. So that is that's the principle on which socialism rests. Any thoughts, guys, before I go on?
I would just like to add something, that when it comes to these sort of procedures, as much as we think that people will say, let's actually do this and it's for the greater good and all of those things. It's absolutely not true. People do things for the here and the now, for themselves. So money, power. So all of these people, they gain power, and then their solution is, well, we need to actually kill lots of people because it will be better for future generations. That's not true. They do it because they want to get people killed. So it's that kind of nonsense to a degree. They want people killed and they sell it to the population. But I don't buy it that these people are just really thinking this is going to be great for the world. It's like, nope, you are just a psycho.
Yep, these are crazy people. These are murderous. So according to Wells, the socialists desired a complete organization for all those human affairs that are of collective importance. He says, to take instances almost haphazard, that are ways of manufacturing great multitude of necessary things, of getting and distributing food, of conducting business, of begetting and rearing children, of permitting disease to engender and spread chaotic and undisciplined. You see, you can't let people have freedom where they can just do what they like. You have to control all of that. All of that needs to be controlled by them, the Fabians, the socialists. You see, he's a Fabian and a socialist. Now, apparently he left the Fabian Society, but who knows? Did he really? It's like, it's like when you leave the mafia, do you really leave? Once in, always in? So the socialist therefore seeks to make a plan as one designs and lays out a garden, so that sweet and nice things may grow. Wide and beautiful vistas will open, and weeds and foulness will disappear. What makes the garden's graciousness and beauty possible is the scheme and the persistent intention, the watching and the waiting, the digging and the burning, the weeder clips and the hoe. So you see, what makes the garden of life perfect is that we wait patiently with our hoes and our weeder clips, and we are going to tear out the weeds. And for that, we've got the Richardson lethal chamber, and we've got all the gas that we need. So yeah. So guys, I'll end here. Yeah, I just get very angry with people attacking the Jews, right? Because that's the foundation of the Bible. And of course, Jesus was a Jew and the apostles were all Jews, right? The prophets were all Jews. The Bible was written by Jews. And then, of course, they attacked the Catholic Church, which historically is what protected the West against Islam, while the Protestants were actively collaborating with the Muslims. And I can go on with that. And of course, they will, just like the Muslims tell fake stories about their history, Protestants, quite literally, and I will cover this extensively. I have got an entire series already done. I just need to present it on fake history of Protestantism. And then, of course, some severe issues that I will reveal. A lot of Protestantism's doctrines literally come from Islam, right? Literally descend straight out of Islam. So, and I will trace all of that, I'll discuss all of that, and people are not going to be happy. So Protestantism derives a lot of its ideas from the 13th and 14th centuries, which then made its way into the Reformation. And yeah, so I don't appreciate that there's this attack on the foundations of history. And you have people, I mean, how many LGBT Protestant churches are there? Far too many. I'll pause there, guys. I'm done.
Okay, that was great, Lloyd. And yeah, it looks like we have been lied to about history quite a bit. What I'm actually very surprised to see is that the Fabian Society are very open about their history, their goals. That thing, plan for power, is like, come on, if you want to really...
They're public.
Pardon?
I mean, they're public. They publish this stuff. They've been public about it. We'll do even more. I mean, these guys get even more blatant. This is just getting warmed up. These guys are blatant about it. They've been saying this for decades publicly.
Yeah, and even the names, that plan for power, it's like, come on, if you want to telegraph what you are trying to do is just insane. And even the logo, the wolf in sheep's clothing, these sort of things are supposed to be obvious. And the fact that the politicians, particularly in the Labour Party, they seem to all be out of this particular camp is really, really worrying. So, good luck to you, Thandros.
Thandros, over to you.
Yeah, you've brought out many features, that you've brought things together in the last two sessions that we've been going through, the last two slides you've compiled. Many of the things that you've discussed, other people may not know, but you and I have discussed these things privately on several occasions over the years, but I didn't see it as a global package where it intertwines in so many areas like a tapestry, and has manifested itself in other countries as well, like India, like Pakistan, and what was the other country? Was it the Philippines? Did you say, or Indonesia? So, and we can see it manifest in Canada as well. So, yeah, very well put together, Lloyd. But it just shows you the sickness of the condition of the hearts of some men, and those men are the ones that are ruling man at the moment.
Yeah, no, there's a problem. I just want to show the audience this. Briefly, I'm going to talk about Protestant Islamization. You know, the claim, the common Protestant claim, Scripture interprets Scripture, is not original to the Reformation. It is not original to the Reformers. It's Islamic. It's Islamic doctrine imported directly into the Reformation. So this is the westernized version of the Islamic Al-Quran, Yafasiru Baduhan Badan, okay? So this is the highest and most foundational method of tafsir or exegesis. This is an Arabic principle of Quranic exegesis, which means some parts of the Quran explain other parts. So this was obviously foreign to historical Christianity prior to this, but when the Reformers rejected Catholicism, Martin Luther rejected reason and logic as evil, as satanic, they had to find other frameworks for interpreting and for moving forward with their particular Gnostic-aligned interpretation of Christianity. Right? This was simply a Gnostic-aligned Christianity. And of course, they adopted Gnosticism and Islam as frameworks. Right? So this is Tafsir al-Quran bi al-Quran. It's based on the theological premise that because the Quran is the speech of God, it possesses divine internal consistency. Right? And so ambiguous verses are clarified by explicit or muqammat ones elsewhere. So the whole idea of Scripture interprets Scripture was never part of, at least not the way the Protestants framed it. They simply borrowed it from Islam and then used that as a wedge, used that as a method for saying, well, you see, the Scripture interprets itself, but therefore I am the arbiter and I don't need any kind of Catholic authority, right? So now this is simply just borrowing, and this is one example. I'll be going through plenty of these where there's direct borrowing commonality between Islam and Protestantism. And these are things I've not been, you know, it's not welcomed by other Protestants because they don't want to talk about these little things. They're uncomfortable. So, yeah, so leave it at that. So guys, thanks very much. Yeah, the Church of England is a mess. So guys, thanks. Do talk about this. These are very uncomfortable things. This is why I have people who are not happy with the things I have to say here, not happy with the evidence that I present, and with the conclusions that I draw from this. But yeah, the facts are what the facts are. And the Fabian Society is evil. So yeah, the Fabian Society is evil. So talk to people about that. Socialism is evil. It is not insane. It is evil. And it's time we start seeing it as evil and talk about it. Public sentiment needs to shift, and it is shifting. So understand, and we haven't even got into the Islamic influences here, but you've seen these Fabians were very pro-Islamic. So yeah, guys, good night, and thanks all. Till next time.